saw you last night. Coming down, I saw you. I knew I'd be fine. Coming down, I saw you last night. Coming down, I saw you. I knew I'd be fine. Yeah, I knew I'd be fine.
feeling sorry for the ROTC guys.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, a lot of
that's a
push-ups.
good thing.
Yes.
Did you go?
Yeah,
you go?
did you go in?
No,
It's
I
cool.
did not want to.
I just watched TV, it was great, air conditioned,
Yeah.
water.
Well, it was really hot. There's this awesome mural that shows all like the 14 mountains named along that.
I know.
It's
How were
Do we
you?
wanna wait for Paul or should we get started? Because do you have a lot of material? I mean, and I know everybody's kinda anxious for this. And then when he comes in,
okay. We can
So
do that.
I think we'll go ahead and get our work session started this evening for Monday, August 28th at 6:03 PM. Who's gonna lead it off? Ms. Unger?
Good evening, Town Board. So before you tonight is the National Citizen Survey. There was a lot of information, so I apologize, but it's really great data that hopefully you'll use throughout the years to come until our next one, kind of as a tool and a resource when big topics are being discussed to kind of look back and see, you know, what we're focusing at that time. And we'll use this as staff in terms of the budget and the strategic plan that we have. So how do we allocate those dollars to the needs of our residents? So to give you a brief overview of the survey and kind of high-level information on it, the survey we collected from May to June. We had 511 respondents, which is really good. That was a 35% response rate, and the national average is anywhere from between 20 and 30, so we got the word out, is what that shows. It's a statistically valid survey. It's mailed out to the residents. They receive a hard copy and mail it back. And our margin of error was 4%, and usually the national average is around 5% for margin of error. In our previous surveys, one was conducted in 2013 and then 2011. So we try to do this every few years to have a good baseline of data.
Tried to do it over 2 years. We didn't do it in 2015, so it was a year we did the comprehensive plan. And we took a lot of information through that process. We thought we'd be overloaded to do 2 surveys, so we just focused on that.
So as you probably saw in the information, the survey was broken down into 3 categories: community characteristics, governance, and participation. So we'll first start with community characteristics. So looking at quality of life, the top qualities that residents responded to was Windsor has a place to live, raise a child, and retire. Those were all very strong, high data points. 8 out of 10 ranked those as top qualities for Windsor. Also, the overall appearance of town was very strongly rated. Safety, we saw that throughout the survey that was one of the top qualities that they valued and had a high perception of. And then also walking trails, that was higher than the national benchmark, along with safety. So those are some of the areas where they feel most strongly about for community characteristics. And then areas that they felt the town could improve upon, and some of these we kind of already inherently know. Traffic flow was an issue, and that probably goes along with growth. Public transportation, and those 2 top ones were lower than 2013's data when we last took the survey. Shopping opportunity lower than 2013. And then shopping opportunities, employment opportunities, the residents felt like that those were ranked lower. And then affordable housing, that was lower than the national average.
Shopping and employment were lower, always have been kind of low.
Yep, and they've been consistently low throughout throughout the information we have there. Looking at the focus area, so these are the areas that in the next 2 years residents kind of focused on. That should be our focus areas as a town. And so again, they just highlighted safety and the economy. And that's, when you read the data, safety's always mentioned lots of times. And then the economy, kind of going back to those shopping opportunities, retail opportunities. So those were the 2 focus areas for the residents. Yeah.
You wanna wait till the end?
No, go for it. Jump in.
When they talk, economy sounds misleading. I mean, I think our economy is strong, but our shopping is not that
Local
great.
economy. People probably feel strong nationally, but there are opportunities for local retail, those type of abilities to shop locally.
I had a question
Mhm.
similar to that too. We're being compared to similar communities. I don't know exactly what that means. I'm thinking about the shopping.
Mhm.
We're located between three larger cities. So we're probably not gonna have as much retail here as maybe a town of 25,000 out in the middle of eastern Colorado.
Yeah,
So
and that's
how's
part of
that-
it. And so the national benchmark, so similar communities and then just national average of looking at others. So some of those informations like public transportation, also ours comes back that it's a lot lower than the national average, but also we don't have that public transportation or some of those amenities that other communities that are closer might have. But this is focusing on our community, what amenities do we have? They could say like, well, I can go shopping but outside of the town limits, but the survey mainly focus on what's inside of
Just to-
Windsor.
okay.
Do you think they understand the correlation between to have those amenities
Mm-hmm.
means you have to be bigger, you have to have more population, which
Yeah.
means you
Yeah.
probably have to have more traffic, increased problems in
Before-
traffic flow. I mean, all of that comes with that. And
Mhm.
is there any data that shows there's that understanding or acceptance of, you know, if you want all these big retail, you also have to be a much bigger marketplace, meaning more homes
And that's how we can interpret the data, knowing those things, thinking, well, we've got the MPO that helps with transportation and a variety of those things that we're thinking about. So that's where we kind of need to do our due diligence of thinking, you know, bigger picture, what does this really mean? Well, we're a smaller community, but here are ways we're going to address that, or, you know, what is the low-hanging fruit for us? So governance is the next category that was ranked. Windsor leadership was ranked very high, so give yourself a pat on the back. So 6 out of 10 respondents said that they felt that there was excellent leadership in place, which is very high marks. And 86% of respondents said they had a very overall quality of life, and the services offered are great services. So that's always, it's a little bit higher than the national average, which is good, and I'll show you a breakdown on the next slide of compared to the federal government. Crime prevention,
I'll make a
that's,
comment
yeah,
about,
mhm.
you're looking at the individual questions, customer service was very high, so compliments to all of you for what you've done.
Absolutely. Crime prevention and drinking water, also high marks for governance. Recreation, that we saw shot up a little bit more compared to other years, probably with the CRC coming online is my guess, so people are using those amenity more because the expansion, and parks were rated highly. And then also areas to improve, bus or transit, again, that's probably a larger community. But overall, looking at the whole survey in total and governance as well, we haven't changed much compared from year to year. All of our data it's really, really strong. Windsor's doing good consistently, and most of the information has been ranked similar from 2013 to 2011. So it's like you're at the tipping point, it's already really high, so how do we keep having high marks year over year, I think will be the key in keeping consistent ratings, because when you're already talking about 86%, well, you know, what does it look like in the future years to come? And then just another quick slide that I thought was interesting about governance, value of services paid by taxes, that was also really high, 64%. And so, you know, the dollars to what's getting done, people felt strongly about that. Overall directions, welcoming of citizens, confidence in town government, all hovering near 70, which is great marks, along with being honest, treating residents fairly. You can read those. The good news is that we're ranked higher than the federal government for services paid, so 41% compared to the federal government. So, hey, at least we're doing a lot better, which is great, but I think that's a great reflection on our town board's leadership. You know, the values of services paid and what we're getting done with it is very strong. And then one of the last categories for the main survey is participation. This is a little bit lower, but that's also compared to the national average. People just aren't as engaged as much. But goodness, look at the voter election turnout. That is amazing. And then then you kind of look at those lines. So you have voted in election 92%. That's amazing. And then also read or watch the local news, so those residents are also staying really engaged, so our newspaper correspondent in the back, they're being engaged. But if you look at it, they haven't watched a public meeting or attended. So maybe they're reading the newspaper, things possibly they feel like are going well for them. Unless there's like a hot button issue year, think back to oil and gas or chickens or some of those things that have happened in prior years. If there's not something big, maybe that means that all is well for them unless there's something that is brought to their attention. And then we kind of look at volunteerism. Some of those numbers are a lot lower, and you know, thinking about how do we involve our service clubs and some of those groups, if that's an avenue that's of interest to get people more engaged. But the good news, people feel like there's a great sense of community in Windsor, which is really strong. So how do you capture that good feeling of Windsor into you know, volunteerism or
Doesn't that follow along though, along the lines of just national averages?
Yeah.
All of those numbers are
that's
down
all shared.
nationally.
And that's, yeah, exactly.
How do our election numbers vet out with our actual numbers for our local election? Did we see, I mean, are we seeing in the high 90%? I mean, because this is people just saying, yes,
Yeah,
I voted.
That's
and
true.
Whether it is accurate or not, does our
I don't
statistics?
think so. I think if you ask Patty, it's more like in the sixties.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Well, these
Still
are the
pretty
people
high,
who
though.
took
Yeah.
the time to do the survey too.
Yeah, and I think the same
Yeah.
people who are gonna
These are-
take the time
Right.
to vote are the same ones who are
You
gonna
read
take
the
the time.
paper, you know.
Cause you look at, what, we had roughly a third of the surveys returned.
Mm-hmm.
2/3 of the people that also did the survey were female.
Now,
I
I
don't know
had a
if that has
question about that,
anything to-
was that just the internet? Because,
I don't know.
There
I
were
saw
two
that-
different surveys. So we had the web-based survey that we sent out after the hard copy. So mainly what I'm focusing on is the statistically valid survey. But we did have more people correspond that were female for the web-based option, which also, if you look at our Facebook and Twitter data, we do, and the national data shows that women are more involved on social media.
do we have that data as far as on the mailed out surveys?
Mhm.
What percent of respondents were male versus female?
We
Right.
do, I don't have it
See
right
that.
in front of me, but I could pull it up of what the breakdown was.
This includes both the online and the mail, right? Or
Not
just-
this one.
is
There's-
just the mail-in.
Just the mail-in survey. There is one question that I pulled side by side because most of the questions were very similar compared to the mail data, so I didn't think it'd be, you know, worth it to break down both of them. But I included the web-based information in your packet. But I'll pull up that information after this.
Where does our read or watch local news compare to last time? Is it still that high? As high as it was previous? I mean, because
Yeah, we'll go to
that's
that
why we
one.
continue to do so much in the newspaper,
Mhm.
because the last survey showed we had a large portion of
Yeah.
our community still engaging in the newspapers.
It's actually our next
Oh,
one, so I'll compare so 2017 information versus 2013 on the right. We did add word of mouth, that wasn't included on last survey. I think that goes along with the small town feel and people engaging with their neighbors. And then newspaper was ranked 34%, town website 32, social media. So good numbers there, but comparatively, major sources, newspaper was ranked the highest previously. So we've kind of seen that shift a little bit.
Was the sample the same size based upon relative population in 2013 to 17?
It was the same, but we got to add 200 more residents that it was mailed to. So it was 1,300 residents it was mailed to. This year was 1,500. So,
1,500 this year, 1,300 then.
so just
Just to clarify, it's neighborhood websites with followers, social media, not word of mouth. Word of mouth is talking across your fence.
Yeah.
Face to face.
Mhm.
Okay,
But
Okay.
still, those people need to get the news somewhere. So
right, right.
Hopefully.
yeah,
Well, but,
Kelly.
which I think that's why we have our work cut out for us,
Mhm.
because word of mouth,
That's right.
then you're relaying on whatever somebody
Mhm.
is saying, and it may not always be accurate as, you know,
that's true.
and so, you know, so either, I mean, so I think it means we need to bolster all the rest of those, so that they are, those numbers are higher.
I agree. That's what I was thinking.
Evan?
Well, I'm just wondering, as we discuss this, are we gonna come back and tear it apart and what we need to do to do something about what we're seeing? Or we
Yeah,
just gonna go
that's-
through?
that's
which-
Sure,
Tonight's
the next
conversation.
35 minutes, 40 minutes is all yours on this, so.
Is that what we're gonna do?
Mhm.
Sure.
Because I mean, just, the reason I say that, there are some points in there that I think about 42% as being, you know, good. And I'm thinking educationally, if we get 42% return, that's good. But when we have only 3% channel 8, 24% direct email, that's an area that we need to work on, and it's communication. And so, and I know we have a new director, and, all right, we'll talk about that later. I mean, that's the point that I'm getting at.
And some of the interesting information with this is that we saw town website increase by 10%, and then social media increased by 15%. So people are starting to go a little bit more web-based than they were in the previous years. And then to show you the web-based survey, so obviously this data is gonna be skewed because people are already accessing the survey online, so take that for what it's worth.
Right.
But for those web-based people, social media was their highest form of news. And then town website, then word of mouth, then direct emails, and local newspaper at 25%. So that data is a lot different from your mail-in people versus the online people who are already that captive audience online.
Well, I think one of the factors too that we have to consider is people could give multiple responses, obviously, because those totals are well over 100%. So I read it in the newspaper and then I talked to my neighbor about it and she had a detail I didn't read in the paper.
Yeah.
So now I've listed both of those things. So I think a lot of those things go hand in hand and, you know, I think it would be interesting to have a similar question, but it's like, what's your main source of information, where it's one answer?
Yeah.
Would be an
and that's a good
interesting,
point. And these, to clarify for you, so I know that they look like they're over 100%, but each one of these is its own slider bar.
Right.
So it's, you know, major, minor, whatever the other one was. So it's all within their own scale, but compared up for major news source.
In our packet, under newspaper, it says local newspaper and then in parentheses, online. So what does that mean? Only if they're reading the paper online or? in
Yeah, we
hard-
wanted to break down the survey a little bit more
Okay.
to see what that was like.
So this one
compared
is
to-
only referencing the online version of
Mhm.
the newspaper, not the actual in-hand newspaper.
Or this is the in-hand newspaper, that data.
This one,
Mm-hmm.
what was in our packet is just the online, when it's referencing the newspaper?
It was both, there was both on there.
It's both,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Some people don't get the newspaper print version, so we have to look at it online.
So speed of growth was another question that we had. 80% felt population growth was too fast, and then retail and job growth was rated as too slow. So you can see the breakdown of the data there as well.
So again, that's a big disconnect,
Yeah,
because you need one for the other.
it's chicken and egg, and, yeah.
well, I felt like that goes into some of the issues too, as you read through some of the comments about affordable housing. You know, it's a supply and demand thing, so if all of a sudden we quit growing to maintain our small town feel, demand is gonna stay high, so then that with no growing supply, that's gonna send housing prices through the roof, so I think at some point to really make some of this useful, you almost need to have the A or B, because I think a lot of times these surveys present it in a matter where it's, I can have it all, and there's no price tag attached to it either.
Right.
I can have my small community that's quits growing, and I can have improved traffic, but I can also have more retail and bus transit and,
Right.
you know,
I think where we come in though is to, if we're growing too fast, I think we really have to focus on traffic. That's something we can control. We can't control, I guess we could control growth, but I don't think anyone wants to necessarily do that. So I think we have to look at ways to mitigate those concerns. If growing too fast means traffic, which I think most people would make that correlation, we need to look at the traffic side probably.
I think that's part of it, but like when you get into the part, maybe I'm jumping ahead on you, Kelly.
Sorry.
but with some of the comments, there was a lot of references to the small town feel, but there was a lot of used tos, for now, we haven't lost it yet, you know, not for long, disappearing. A lot of those things that implied we're not staying the small town that a lot of people necessarily want us to.
I think, one of the things I always think, and I think this is confirmed in my thinking, is Northern Colorado's a commuter region. So, I hear what we say about chicken and egg and the population versus retail, but we are bringing residents to shop other places.
Right.
Because there's choices to go to in this region of community. And there's plenty of jobs within this region and community also. So we are kind of, one of the conversations you remember, Christian, I don't know who was here back in 2013, was a debate whether to become Benjamin community for the balance of the region. And I remember there was some pretty good discussion about the appropriateness of that or not, and the balance of that. Because, again, as long as gas is $2.20,
Right.
it's pretty easy to
Right.
drive somewhere
Right.
and go to work and get your, wherever you need to get your shopping done. So when that changes,
Yeah.
then what's our strategy, and or does that change the opinions or what?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's always a challenge, I think, for us to be in the center of the retail world. Yeah, we have the population too.
And the job growth thing is significant to that. The smaller people.
Right.
If I'm looking for cons, it's easier to stop and buy something there on the way home, or to go shopping there.
And then you think about transportation, everybody, so it's getting harder now to get to my store. It's harder to get to my job.
Right.
For the handful that,
Yeah.
the handful stay here, maybe about the same. I mean, now you see the transportation issues. But it's really, you can see the transportation growth is hitting the system, making it hard to get to my job, making it hard to get to my retail. And then the question is, when do we flip that so that we can provide those services here? And how do we do that? That's the strategy discussion. that needs to be
And what's the
done.
town's role in
Mhm.
job growth,
Mhm.
those kind of things, and
Mhm.
partnerships with transportation?
Mhm. How important is it to us to
Yeah.
diversify
Yeah.
and make sure we have that diversity?
Yeah.
So our other custom question was about internet service in the home. 95% say they have internet. They ranked it as good, but 31% ranked it as poor, so that might be something to think about. And then the top
Is it-
two providers were CenturyLink and Comcast, and there was a handful of other ones, but they weren't significant enough to mention for you guys. And then the open-ended questions were fascinating if you read all of them. There was a lot of information there. But you can kind of see the general trends. They try to clump them together so you can see a more consistent picture. So that small town feel was and again, this question was the top 3 things you value most about living in Windsor. So they said small town feel, safety, location, parks, rec, culture, all those things. Schools, affordability, and it starts to go down the list that you have there. But not all, 453 respondents filled out the open-ended. So while 511 filled it out, not everyone took the time to fill in blank for that one.
I think it's funny that only 7% say affordable. Yet you had on that other slide, that was like the number 3, affordable housing. So you would think that number would be higher here.
But if I'm
Well, I
living
think they're
here-
saying this is their top 3 things why they live here. So I think the low percentage of affordable is
Oh, is that what they're
Basically,
Yeah.
they're saying it's not
Less
affordable is what they're saying.
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
why
Okay.
it's way down the list,
How was the top 3?
are the reasons why they live here.
Okay.
Most of them.
Oh,
okay.
what you value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things we were low on was on appropriation or participation of supplies for emergency. What is that?
Yeah, so we try to stay consistent with the national survey so we can look at the
Okay.
benchmarks. We've never asked that before. But that was one area, people said that they didn't have an emergency supply, like a go kit ready to go if there was
Was
an
that
emergency.
Asking the individual if you
Uh-huh.
had, not the town.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, not us, it was
Okay.
on,
Okay.
for the
that makes
resident,
sense.
do
That
you
makes sense.
have, an emergency kit?
That makes
And they
sense.
said no. And
Okay.
that's something that, maybe we can promote with Lead to 911, especially with the tornado commemoration, some of
Mhm.
those emergency
Mhm.
management things, making sure our residents are prepared if there is some type of a natural disaster emergency.
Can I go back to the slide about internet, since we've talked about broadband and all of that?
Sure.
Isn't that still one of our work session topics, is about broadband? Now, I mean, I understand that there's a component of providing broadband if there's poor service. But the fact of the matter is 95% of people in Windsor have internet. Everybody probably wishes it was faster, which is what I think plays into the fair and poor,
Mhm.
concept. And the two biggest internet providers are the ones that are here in town, the ones that are mentioned there. I don't know, I'm coming back to, is that still, you think, based upon this survey, that's still a road for us to go down? When does that feasibility thing come back from?
So,
Really,
our partner in this have been delayed. We hope to get information by the end of the year, but it's not gonna be done. So one of the discussions we have to have with some limited information is if you wanna do anything next election, April, on that whole, but everybody's doing that question. But we'll have some information by then. We won't have a complete report done by then. So that's something we probably wanna talk about in December, is where we wanna go with that topic, or not.
What's the deadline for that?
You would have to so it has to be done in a regular election or a special election. So our next would be April, so we'd have to decide by the end of January for a question, but more likely.
I agree with what you're saying, if people, we have choices of service right now, people appear to be fairly happy with it. I still need to see the data of cost benefit, to make a decision on that.
I think April might be kind of soon to be able to
Might
make a
be.
decision without that information that we thought we'd have. Even if it's delayed, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd rather delay and have really good information
Yeah.
to make a really good solid
Yeah.
decision rather than just
Yeah.
try to rush and rush to maybe duplicate some information that we might already glean or know from.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it still goes to, I always kind of still believe there's this, if you go to vote on something, you should know what you're voting on.
Yeah.
And, or at least some level. And there's most communities just go out and say, shall we look into it? Or spend time on it. But then again, I still think, based upon my impression, what that has raised expectation-wise,
Right.
If these
It
are
just-
the word of mouth then is that we're gonna have.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Oh, well, at least that's what happened
Yeah.
in Fort Collins and
And
Loveland.
Loveland,
Those,
right.
their citizens are going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when's it coming? And
Right.
they don't, I think,
How come we
understand
don't
it's
have it
just a
today?
conversation to be had at this
Right.
point.
So it's
Mhm.
risky to do it much.
Well, but see, I look at how many people have it, based upon this sample, granted, this is only, what,
Right.
1% of the whole town or something like that, but 51% are good, 17% say it's excellent, that's 68%, that's 2/3 of everybody that replied, that basically said they're okay with what they've got, and the way they've got it,
Mhm.
and 95% have it, so, cause correct me if I'm wrong, one of the big debates about broadband, especially in areas where they're not as, what's the word I'm looking for,
Rural,
no,
no,
where they don't have access to internet is readily available.
it's primarily rural communities.
Right.
Yep.
But I mean, even in areas where you have maybe a bigger fluctuation than we have in our community of those that can afford to have it, those that can't,
Socioeconomics.
right, socioeconomics, right, that most people that want it here have it.
And I don't disagree with what Paul's saying, but we didn't ask the question, would you like faster internet?
That's true.
And we didn't
Or
reach
more
out to
affordable
businesses.
internet.
More affordable, and I think businesses are a huge component.
So that's
So-
what we get into the cost benefit.
This is interesting, I
Yeah.
do think we need one, I agree with Chrissy, I think April is probably too soon for something. Unless
Well, we
We get a lot in
will get you
January,
what we
don't we?
have in December, we hope we have something in December. It's been pretty disappointing, we thought we had a, I'll tell you, I mean, it's just, you approved this 3 months ago, right?
Mhm.
And Greeley still has not approved it,
Mhm.
and they're just kind of, they're doing other things, and yet, I have several promises for 2 months that they're gonna get going on, so.
And their mayor was pretty gung ho about
Yep.
studying it at least,
Yep.
not even.
Yep.
You mean Greeley hasn't even started their study yet?
No, they're part of our partnership on this, so.
We haven't signed an agreement with them, we've been waiting
The-
months with them.
There's been agreement, the consultant has been chosen.
Just sometimes you have to, partnerships are difficult occasionally.
Mhm.
Meaning it's just sitting there.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
There, oh, let's see.
Every week I keep on thinking it's gonna get started.
I do a Friday morning call every Friday.
Every Friday.
Yep.
My-
Me too.
On my to-do list. So trends, looking at 2013 versus 2017. 73 of the 89 items were ranked similar from the previous year, so not a lot of change or fluctuation. And most are higher than the national benchmark, so that's the good news, that we're doing better than others. Recreation opportunities, that was a big increase, but we know that's due to the rec center. So it's, you know, the key component is how to keep those numbers high for our residents. And then decreased ratings from the two different surveys, traffic flow and signal timing, which we talked about. Housing options, development, and affordability, so those 3 different things on that one. Place to retire slightly decreased on that one, and then natural area preservation, which is interesting, that
Mhm.
decreased a little bit.
Well, as we see more growth in housing, there's less open space, so that makes sense.
I think you're gonna find it's less of a place to retire when housing costs what it costs. You know, and seniors are trying to live on a fixed income and stuff, that's gonna play a part in them choosing to stay here or not, or,
Yeah.
you know, et cetera, with taxes or everything else.
So the main conclusions of the survey that we have is there's a really strong sense of community for our residents, which is great. But for some, they feel like growth may be threatening that small town feel, so that's something to consider as well. So it's slightly a concern for some, and you know how to address population, traffic flow, and housing affordability.
So, do you have other conclusions
Mm-hmm.
and thoughts based upon what you read?
It kind of, from what I think I see, you know, like you just said, Kelly, the growth is a challenge for us, and you talked about the transportation, Mike talked about the transportation you have, I mean, I think that's one of our big challenges now is to maintain that small town feel that you were talking about. We've gotta have the infrastructure that allows us to feel like we're still in a small town. So I think that's our challenge for the next 8 months, 6 months.
I also think
I
though,
don't believe in
our small town charm and quality
Yeah.
comes from our downtown. I think the downtown kind of sets the tone for the overall community. And I think where they're going and kind of what they're doing is going to be key to kind of helping to maintain that as well though. And I think they're on track from what I see to kind of do that. Because I think a downtown oftentimes can be the driver of what the rest of your community is kind of, and it's also just happens to be, you know, right next to our biggest amenity, Boardwalk Park too, so.
But if people can't get down there at some point, or it's too much of a hassle to get there, that's where the quality, that's where we lose that. I think you're correct, but I think we can, if we don't address the traffic and the mobility
Oh yeah, no, I'm not
issues-
saying
Yeah,
we
I
don't
know,
address
but-
those things, but.
But I think you're right, that's what drives, it was interesting that people did favors for their neighbor, that was really high up there. And I think that extends beyond the downtown, but maybe the downtown kind of sets that tone, but maybe it's just the quality of people that we get moving into Windsor.
I think people are gonna associate high traffic with less quality.
Yeah, big city kind of feel.
Well, I think some of it too is there's a lot of people who feel like they have a small community within the community
Mhm.
based off where they live. I mean, I noticed there was quite a few comments that referenced Water Valley, and I think that's an area that very much has, they're kind of a community within the community, and I think there are probably quite a few neighborhoods who have some of that, that helps contribute to their sense of small townness, because they really do know all their neighbors, and I think the schools help impact that too, you know, when 2/3 of the people on my street I see at the PTAC meeting, that helps with that sense of small community. But I guess the question is, how do you balance growth and preserving that?
Especially mentioned schools, is we have another high school right now. Every student goes to Windsor High School unless they live in Poudre District or something. So the majority of our families who have school-aged children are going to end up at Windsor High School right now. With 2 high schools, that's gonna be a little different too. We won't have the same census community.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what I was gonna say is going off of what you're saying too, when people feel like they're connected to their neighbors, it's gonna lead to feeling like you're in a safer community. Cause I know that if I go out of town, I know my neighbors can, but I can tell them, hey, I'm going, and I know they keep watch and everything else, and, you know, and there is a lot of neighbors, I mean, going around, you know, to the different national night outs, I mean, you see the different communities within the community by neighborhood and neighborhood, so I think it's huge, cause I think it plays into the safety factor is what I'm getting at.
What do you guys think of
Oh,
those?
I'm sorry, I was just gonna ask a quick question on that slide. Are they in order of how they rank? So was number 1, or are they all kind of equal?
Not in order.
Okay, they're just all kind
listed.
of the top 3.
And these are your conclusions or the surveys?
The survey's conclusions,
Okay.
so that was from the community livability report.
Okay.
She took exactly what they said and put them into her own slides,
Yeah, that's
because
right.
that's how they read it.
Yep.
Put your name.
I'm sorry.
What do you guys think of the,
In
like
quick.
our parks, how does that play in our sense of community? 'Cause you know, we, in our neighborhood, people just kind of congregate and walk around the park and take our dogs, and I think that's something going forward we have to consider. I know we're changing our park model, but, maybe open space within the neighborhoods is important.
It's where you meet a lot of
You
neighbors.
do, you see it, and you're like,
Right.
and then you start noticing, well, that
Right.
person doesn't live here, why are they driving through? And you just get to know the neighborhood by walking around. The
Mhm.
parks help facilitate that.
One of the comments, not a trend by any means, but just as I read through and I tried to pick out some of the things that really stood out as far as some of the open-ended comments, was there was one comment in there about the Larimer County side lacking that community communication. And I think this kind of goes back to like the comment you made about all the kids go to Windsor. No, they don't.
They
We're
don't,
split
right,
between 3
right.
high schools now, and we're
Yeah.
going to 4 as a town, and I think, I don't know what the answer to it is, but I think sometimes there's a real disconnect that everybody, you know, I mean, I remember having a conversation with somebody about the Windsor High School football games, and they said, oh, Friday nights, everybody in town is at the football game. I'm like, no, there's probably 2/3 of the town that has no idea a football game is even happening. And it's that perceived reality versus
Yeah.
the true reality. And I sometimes wonder if there isn't something we could do to kind of help solidify that while we're split
Yeah.
between 2 counties and 3 school districts, we're still one community, and find a way to make it feel a little more inclusive.
I think those community events are really important, because small town, so many social family activities center around the schools. You know, and as we grow, and we've already got 3 different school districts in each serve. So I think community-wide events play a really important
Yeah,
role,
I
kind
think those are.
of ties what you're talking about, places where different neighborhoods can meet and feel like we're all still. You know,
Well, it's gonna be more of a challenge, I mean, if we end up having another grocery store on the another end of town, people aren't gonna see each other coming and going
Right.
from the grocery store anymore, I mean, things like that, so if it's not for a harvest fest or, you know, that type of thing, there's not gonna be get the whole town together for
Right.
one, regardless if you're on the Larimer County side or the west side or the north, you know, et cetera, so.
I think this goes back to Christie's point, though, the downtown. There may be a grocery store out there, but there's only one downtown, and I
Mhm.
think even, you know, living up there, people talk about downtown, they love to see,
That's an
the same thing
important,
we all wanna see in
it's an
downtown.
important connector,
It
because
is.
I serve a lot of communities that don't have a key downtown corridor. And there's always this like, well, where's the natural place to kind of like convene, to have an event, to do something, and I think we're fortunate, because not only do we have that, but we have one with a gem, you know, right in
Yeah.
the backyard
I was
too,
just
and
saying,
the
we
lake
got a
and
diamond
everything
right
else.
there that most places don't
That's
have,
right.
with the recreational, the entertainment, downtown, we've got a real opportunity.
And I
So I think our DDA is really important.
Yeah, for sure, and I think the rec center also is another point that serves as a common place regardless of where you live for people in
Oh,
terms
the
of
rec center
downtown,
itself?
the rec center, yeah. But I think, I can always go back to my trail, but connectivity
Yeah.
would be important too, where people could ride their bike to high hops.
You're just making it more easily accessible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there were a lot of comments too
mhm.
about the trail connectivity and walkability and.
So, in my tenure here, I've seen a maturity of the issue a little bit, which is kind of fun. Because I would say 10 years ago, there truly was a disconnect, because I would say the average tenure in the Larimer County residents was less than 5 years, maybe even 2 years.
Brand new.
So they were all brand new. Now there's a continuum of those folks who've been there for a while, who know they're in Windsor, and then the new come in and get the word of the mouth that they're in Windsor. Where that used to be, there used to be blocks come in and not know if the zip code was Fort Collins or, you know, where do I live? So I see a little bit more connection to the Larimer County side, because of the maturing. And I also love what you're talking about downtown, because 10 years ago, we used to spend a lot of time talking about, should downtown be the retail center? And it'll never be the retail center anymore in today's modern age, more likely with the buildings as they are. It's a cultural, a place with some retail,
Entertainment,
and amenities.
destination,
But it's a history,
right.
it's a connection to history, and so, if you get, and the bonus is if you get retail out of that, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I like that kind of maturation of discussion, but that doesn't mean we're doing it, but I think it's getting better a little bit over time, particularly with Larimer connection a little bit. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop, I think there's continuing need to remind everybody where we are and such, and how we are doing it. And if I remember, I'd have to go pull, didn't the numbers reflect that we have a pretty good large Larimer Windsor membership with the rec center? Have we done that? No? Have we seen that, or is that, am I dreaming that?
Eric showed it to us, but it was.
By town.
He hasn't done it by zip. Let me run a zip, okay?
Well, I remember seeing something where it was all the dots all over the map, where they were
Yeah.
literally showing where there was
Yeah.
clusters of people, and then there was one up there, 10 up in Severance, or,
Right,
whatever, one coming from.
but it felt like it was
Milliken.
pretty spread wide, pretty well. That's the point, so I think they're
I
coming
do
down.
know the library feels like they get a lot of the Larimer County side coming in to use the library,
Mhm.
which is not in their district, I mean, and they welcome them,
It's a whole
but,
lot more convenient.
but that is
Right.
another,
Transportation.
that's a recognition that they have made, that those folks, even though probably the one over on Harmony is actually could maybe be closer a little bit, but it's
Yeah.
just more convenient to
You're gonna
come this
go
way,
I-25,
yeah, and you
well,
have to
there's
deal
no
with that.
wrecks out there. Or, you're right, so
Mhm.
it's, back to transportation again.
You wanna say something? Go for it.
Oh, I wanna say a lot, but I guess I've just been listening. And I think back to your comment, Kelly, about the people that have other places to go shop. Well, I think as a town board and as a town staff, one of our goals should be to bring those tax
Yeah.
dollars
Yeah.
into this town.
Yep.
And the only way we're gonna do that is to get the shops
Mhm.
here that people can use. And we don't have them.
Mhm.
We don't have the women, and I've said this so many times, I'm sick of it. But by the same token, that's a truth. And I looked at this whole thing at the negatives.
Mhm.
And because I think positives are good. Because we know that we have people that love this town. You can ask anybody, and they'll say, well, I love the town, but, and they want to go to the negatives that are in this report. And I think, Kelly, you said something about the rec center. Well, the rec center has 7,000 members. But those 7,000 aren't just members that live here in town. They're coming from all over the place. And so when you think about, of those 7,000, how many actually answered this survey? I mean, I did, I was one of the people selected, but by the same token, I think when they talk about recreation, I think they're talking about the parks. I think they're talking about the trails, and they're talking about the football program, the soccer programs that kids have available. The only problem is, as Eric said last week, not enough fields for them to participate. So a lot of kids are going to Greeley, and pickleball is a good example. They were all going to Greeley, they were all going to Fort Collins, and a few of them were going to the rec center. Well, now I watch the pickleball court every day, just to see, and it's too hot. And so how do you solve that problem? Put lights up, so they can go at night when it's cooler. These are older people who can't take the heat, and I'm a perfect example of it, and playing golf. I mean, so those are some things, and I'm not knocking what people said, I'm just trying to reiterate some of the things I heard. And Cindy said 2/3 of the people aren't at the football games. Well, I think a big part of those 2/3 are at Mountain View, are at Fossil Ridge, and they're going to their kids' games outside of Windsor. But you go look at the crowds at Windsor, that stadium is packed, almost every game. People excited as all get out about what they're seeing. I guess the only other thing I'll say is that I think that from this survey, I saw what I believed. Number one, if we want people to stay in town, we've got to improve the roads. And I don't want to drive 15 or 20 minutes to Fort Collins through that traffic. I don't want to drive 15 minutes to Loveland through that traffic. I'd rather drive to my hometown. And if it's DDA, good. But it's not DDA right now, in my mind. I don't feel that way, Mayor, I'm sorry. I don't feel really good about going downtown, because there's nothing there for me. And the people I talk to in Water Valley, they'll go someplace else. I mean, these are just
All the numbers are up in terms of sales tax revenue in the downtown. There's sections that are up like 42%.
Yes, they're going to the things that they have to go to. But I think there could be more of a walking area in that area that people would enjoy, like they do in Highland Park, like they do in, so I'll quit. I'll say this though. I think one of the things we need to do when we get any kind of like we're gonna get tonight, 600 homes and 237 homes, I think we ought to be looking in that planning stage, okay, what are they doing with schools? And how do the schools feel about it? How do they feel about grocery stores? And, you know, we've talked about King Soopers being out south and southeast. We're gonna need more schools, and no matter what you do, when we get to 40,000, 50,000, it's gonna almost quadruple the number of schools that you're gonna have. And, I mean, I've seen that in Longmont, I've seen it in another town I lived in. So I guess, I think as we plan, and I think our planning commission and our planning department has to really come to us with an answer. What have you seen as far as the schools? What have you seen, and what do you feel we ought to do? Those are just, I mean, those are things that I've thought about watching the growth, and I don't want to have to drive someplace else to shop.
But how do we get the shops to come to Windsor? I mean, how do we, as a town board?
We're gonna get the growth, so I'm not fighting growth like some people are. And I think even the people fighting growth, they're not really fighting it, they know it's gonna happen, but they wanna do it right. And I think all of us probably ran for the selection for this board, promising that we would do smart growth. I know I did, and that's one thing that I think we ought to really concentrate on. How do you get people, I mean, how do you get growth? We improve our roads and we give traffic. And I learned something today that I hadn't thought about that makes a lot of sense. Maybe you don't want all those thoroughfares like I thought. Maybe you want to concentrate the areas in concentrated areas where you have retail shops and things that people can go. And, all right, I've talked long enough.
There's only so much we can do as a board to bring, they're not gonna come here because we're nice guys.
But we can provide leadership and making
Right, I
sure
think we-
that, and
I think
we are, I think we
Stacy
are.
works hard and diligent
Yeah.
to go after economic development, let me tell you. She catches wind that anybody is looking, she is out there on top of
Okay,
them.
and I understand that, and I realize.
But it's sometimes it's,
What's the problem that they're not coming?
we don't have enough numbers.
Enough people,
We don't have enough
enough
rooftops.
people, enough revenue, enough money.
Or we're
enough
too
tax
close
dollars.
to two of
In
the other
today's
stores.
retail world,
And
it's
when
gonna
we
be-
are close, a lot of people don't mind driving 15 miles.
One of the things I'm trying to get a better understanding of, because I'm not a city planner, is I understand the chicken and egg. You gotta have the growth that gives enough motivation for a business to say, let's take a look at Windsor. I'd like to have a better understanding of what a town government's role is in encouraging different types of businesses. And this is not a black and white answer, I know. When I was on we had that Northern Colorado Coalition look at affordable housing. And the question I was asking there is, what are the tools that are available in the public and private sector both to encourage affordable housing, whatever that is? So I think part of what I would like to understand is what can we do other than just build more houses that encourages different retail, different restaurants, different jobs, those type of things.
Well, that's part of the presentation. Stacy gives,
That
when
we're
she's
doing
got
tonight,
the
right.
package,
We're
she's
looking
got
at that, yeah.
all those tools available to her
But
in
then are
terms of
there
incentives
policies
for
that we
folks.
are we doing the right policies?
Well,
Are there other things that we should be doing or?
So,
might
so
wanna
it's staying
do?
true to the comp plan, cause you have a comp plan that
Yeah.
dictates that. So then that's probably what needs to be reviewed
Yeah.
as we look at is does the comp plan reflect what you're saying? Cause it's all about first proximity of land, affordability.
Zoning, transportation,
Zoning,
those
right.
type of things that would encourage
Right.
a business to say, I want to locate here.
Then if you have the right mix of
Yeah.
it, then you go to the next level, which is fees or incentives, directed or indirect. If you pick a group of something that you want, you go after that with your tools that you have. So if you decide whatever, if you have something that you think you're deficient in, then you give direction, say, we want to pursue those because we think we have a deficiency in retail, this type of retail, and then you get ready to make it a priority and send Stacy out to try and bring those.
And how
entities in.
specific should a town board get in that? Like, one of my coffee sessions, a lady came in, she had a whole list, she had a whole list of type of businesses that she'd like to see, like
Yeah.
a children's toy store
Yeah.
as an example. How specific do we get in a board as, say,
It's very
That's a
specific once you get the
market-driven
sense of
thing.
reality from somebody who knows the business.
yeah,
But let's not forget,
Yeah.
how many people say we're growing too fast?
Right.
Yeah.
well,
So-
yeah, you can't-
I know they want retail, but
yeah,
And that's a problem, a survey like this presents itself that we could get Kohl's and Target to open stores here, but we're going
And
to
stop growing.
slow growth and stay our small town. And we can also have mass transit with no tax increases because there's no price tag attached to it. And I think that's the tough thing that I think sometimes I feel like we need information that's more grounded in reality to say, which is more important? Slowing growth and keeping the small town feel or increasing retail and job opportunities?
I would say I would assume slowing growth, because there are retail options. I mean, we may not wanna drive to Harmony to go to Target or Lebanon, but it's an option.
So that's your discussion next May. Strategic plan, that is
Strategic
all
plan,
about strategy,
right,
right? And you're gonna be starting that
Yeah.
ball up again and
right.
recrank it and having those very directed conversations, I hope, to
I
make
think
the
one of the
determinations where you wanna go.
big conversations we're gonna have is, how do we control growth if we even want to?
Yeah.
Because people are gonna come because they love this town, and they give up all the things that I mentioned, they do. Water Valley just keeps growing and keeps growing, but like I said, 900 homes coming in. Tonight, we're gonna talk about 900 homes. What
That's
are they
like,
gonna do? Where are they
that's
gonna work? What, you know, and they evidently don't worry about that. They're gonna find a way to drive, they're gonna find a way to shop,
it's worth it.
and That's because they love this town.
You'll
I
find-
do too.
you'll find
Don't
them-
get me wrong,
you'll
I
find
love
s-
this town.
You'll find some retailers though will not even consider it until the population
Yes.
within
We
a
know
certain
that.
radius is X amount
Right.
currently, not forecasted, but already there.
Right.
So,
Well, but
Exactly.
like what Kelly said though too, and the retailer market is changing, they're all reassessing what, you know, what that means and where they need to
And
be. I mean,
nervous,
look at
and-
Walmart, who's
Mhm.
owned property for how many years, and
Yeah. Apparently you can go to Whole Foods and get 40% for chickens, right?
Yeah.
I talked to two
Would that-
restaurant owners in
$6
Cal
chickens.
so we have just about a couple minutes. Are you wrapped up?
50,000
Yes.
pieces.
what you needed to say. Did you wanna go over anything with future meetings?
No, I do wanna touch, or we can touch, there was that Embrace School District item.
Impel?
And Cindy's
Oh.
only, besides Ivan, and Ivan said if there's somebody else that wants to do it. So are you all generally okay with Cindy doing it, or do you wanna talk to her about that?
Would I wanna arm wrestle for it?
No.
Well-
I fully agree with Cindy, and I said, I'm already on 2 school committees, I don't need to be another one. And,
So if there's somebody else, let Cindy know, and then you two let me know, but Dan did that for me, and I don't
as
know
far
why.
as I'm concerned, we can, as a board, can decide. I love the idea Cindy's gonna do it. She'll be a great representative for us and for the town.
she knows how to embrace.
No meeting next Monday?
It's empowered.
Empower, embrace.
I don't remember what's on future town board meetings for a work session in 2 weeks, but
So on September 18th, Metro District
how about the
follow-up.
11th?
On the 11th, that's the,
Oh,
open,
that's
that's
okay.
our second
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
open meeting.
And you got my email that I will not be here on the 11th.
So kind of, you know, and
I
then
do
we'll
that. Yes, Friday. Okay, good. That's all I have.
okay. You guys want to sign this card?
Did everybody like the survey? Just last thing, is
Yes.
it worth doing? I think it is.
Every couple of years.
Good
I
information.
think it is.
Right.
It hadn't been done in 4 years.
Of me for the places I have been and the dirt that I've been gathering.